final speaker for this morning session is my colleague Andi from Gajah Mada and also University of Wollongong. So, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the introduction. The last thing that you want to do as a student like me is to present after Vivian. But he's very nice to leave something for me, but the only issue is he leave something that I did not prepare, so it's even worse. I'm Imade Andi Arsana. You better read it that way, not I made Andi Arsana. It's a bit awkward. I'm from Gajah Mada, as you mentioned. I'm finishing my PhD now in Wollongong in Australia. My talk is about understanding geospatial dimension of the South China Sea dispute in search of possible solution. It is an Indonesian perspective, even though I have to admit, have to clarify that this is not a view of Indonesian government whatsoever. I'm the only Indonesian here, not as many as our Malaysian delegates, but I think there are some students here from Indonesia who can help me later on if there's a question about Indonesia, yeah? Mas Andi. I'll talk a little bit about introduction and the geographical setting of South China Sea, and then go a little bit into the concept of Nusantara. Not like Nusantara that Pak Ramli introduced yesterday, it's a bit different. And then the geospatial dimension in the South China Sea. I'd like to inform you that I have been studying maritime boundaries, so my presentation will not be, I'm not able to go too far from maritime boundaries, so this will be very much influencing my presentation. And I'll end the presentation with concluding remarks. We have heard so much about South China Sea since yesterday. Talking about South China Sea is actually talking about the tale of complexity. Let me visualize what other speakers have actually informed us since yesterday. This is the land areas in the South China Sea, and then we have the small islands which is disputed, it's probably islands over here. And this is what we call a baseline from where countries start to claim the ocean based on the Law of the Sea Convention. We have two archipelagic states here, Indonesia and Indonesia and the Philippines. And from that baseline, based on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, states are entitled to claim 12 nautical miles of territorial sea. And beyond that is exclusive economic zone. Okay, this line, for example, the agreed maritime boundaries between Indonesia and Vietnam and Indonesia and Malaysia. This agreement between China and Vietnam, the first 11 dotted line, which is published first time in 1947. And then somehow the line then modified into 9 dash line, which is actually, in terms of geographical position, it does not really reflect the original 11 dash line. And then recently, early this year, China Sino Maps Press published another map with additional line over here, which is quite interesting. This is what Philippines has in its constitutions. Philippines claim Kalayaan Islands Group, and then this is what Malaysia claimed through its 1979 maps. Brunei and Malaysia has this joint development, and then this is what Indonesia claimed. So, and Singapore, also there's a potential claim from the newly secured Pedra Branca, if you will, and then joint maritime seismic undertaking. It is a collaboration for a joint survey, but I don't think it moves towards a resolution. And then this is what Vietnam designated as concession blocks actually to be given to international companies. And this is where the incidents in 2011 or 10 took place. Sinuk, this is unilaterally by China, the concession block given again to international companies. So basically we are talking about, this is what Vivian already mentioned briefly about extended continental shelf. So Malaysia and Vietnam submitted this space to belong to their countries into the United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. So basically what I'm trying to say is this is a very complicated situation, and my focus will be here at the southwestern part of the South China Sea, because I'm talking about the Indonesian perspective. Now let me begin with Indonesia first, because I was asked also to talk about a little bit about Nusantara concept. This is what Indonesia looked like. This is the land territory. When Indonesia got its independence in 1945, this is what Indonesia looked like. So Indonesia only claimed 3 nautical miles from each island. So 3 nautical miles from each island. And this is viewed as a not very advantageous for Indonesia, because you will see that high seas over here when beyond 300 of each island. So that's why our Prime Minister at the time, when you see this, when you zoom that one, so there will be only 3 nautical miles from each island, and then high seas beyond that, which is Indonesia is not seen as surrounded by one blanket of sovereignty. And then our Prime Minister at the time, Juanda, declared that Indonesia has to be united into one single sovereignty. For the first time at the time, Juanda declared what we call it as an archipelagic state. So it was in 1957. So the position was then maintained in the first negotiation of the United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea in 1958. Unfortunately, at the time, most of the parties did not accept that proposal. So it was basically rejected. Until in 1982, then the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea recognizes these principles of archipelagic state. So it means now a country like Indonesia with a lot of islands can then designate the baseline that enclosed actually the entire archipelago, and then start to claim the 12 nautical miles and then 24 nautical miles, 28 nautical miles, not from the islands but from the blanket, from the belt that it designated. So if you see the difference, this is what Indonesia initially claimed. So after UNCLOS, this is what Indonesia managed to have. So it's actually more than what it originally proposed. Now this is what Indonesia have based on the Law of the Sea Convention. So 12 nautical miles of territorial sea, 24 nautical miles of contiguous zone, and then 200 nautical miles of EEZ, and even more, as Vivian already mentioned about the continental shelf. So if you see here, for example, this is what Indonesia can claim unilaterally, because there is no other neighbors over there. But in here, this is the bilaterally defined line between Indonesia and Australia. And in here you can see the dust blue line. It is what Indonesia claimed to be the boundaries with other countries. So now the focus is over here in the South China Sea. So this red line is actually the agreed line between Indonesia and Vietnam, Indonesia and Malaysia. And this blue line is what Indonesia wants to be the future EEZ boundaries or water column boundaries with Vietnam and Malaysia. Now we focus here. This is the baseline. Once again, I repeat. This is the part of the famous 9 dotted line, or now becomes the 10 dotted line. This is the agreed line between Indonesia, Vietnam, and Indonesia, Malaysia. Okay, the 9 dotted line is a broken line. It is not a continuous line, so we cannot really define up to where China really wants the water or the territory belongs to China. But what I did is actually probably Vivian will question this accuracy. But if you want to try to join up those lines, this will be the possibility. So we can really see here now. Okay, this is the 200 nautical miles, and then this is what Brunei claims. This is what Indonesia claimed to be the future line between Indonesia and Malaysia, Indonesia and Vietnam. And this is what extended continental shelf submitted by Vietnam and Malaysia. Now with that, Indonesia's official position is actually never recognized China as one of its neighbors. We recognize only 10 neighbors, which is India, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Philippines, Palau, PNG, Australia, and Timor-Leste. So China is not one of the neighbors that we consider with which we should delimit our boundaries. But to see this fact, it's probably a different story now. To add more information on how assertive China is in terms of the claim, there are incidents actually when Chinese fishing vessel came to this area, which Indonesia considered as part of Indonesia's waters. The 3 incidents, at least that I recorded, in 2009, 2010, and 2013, which is, the thing is that the incidents then followed up by Indonesia coming to try to capture them or to chase them away. But then what happened is there is something big coming, what they call a Chinese fishing administrative vessel or something like that, which is a civilian vessel, but according to the unconfirmed information, it is actually not purely a civilian vessel, but it is actually a converted battleship into a civilian ship, but with same equipment with the battleships. So there is, but it's quite interesting. It is not very easy for us to find what happens after that, because no reports and only very short information in the newspapers and like that. So, but this is actually an important information to that indicates how China is now more assertive with the 9 dotted line or 10 dotted line in terms of the maritime claims in the area. Me being somebody who studied maritime boundaries, now thinking about the possible boundaries between Indonesia and China, which I don't think my government will agree with what I'm saying, because the official position is there is nothing to worry about China, there is no boundaries issue to discuss with China. Let us again look at the possibilities of maritime claims from these islands over here. We know that they are not disputed, but it doesn't matter if they're disputed or not, they are still entitled to maritime areas around them based on the Law of the Sea Convention. This is, for example, Spratly Islands. I think Vivian already mentioned earlier, or some other presenters. This is how it looks like. There is a monument here. Okay, this island is now occupied by Vietnam. Monument here. If you see what I found recently in Google Earth, it's quite interesting that somebody modeled actually that what we have here, a monument. So we have the model as if it is a public domain data or information. Now we can see it in Google Earth or Google Maps. Of course, Google Maps is not an official document from any countries, but we know that Google is very effective in shaping the public opinion. If you still remember what happens to Nicaragua and Costa Rica back then, Nicaraguan troops came into Costa Rican territory because they claim that we use Google Maps in our operation, which is very quite interesting. And remember what happens to China and India when they have two versions of Google Maps with a different line depicting the borders and things like that. So Google can do something. I don't know whether this is actually made by our high-tech person in Vietnam or in China, but it says it belongs to Vietnam, so maybe from Malaysia. No. Okay. So this actually, Amboina K, as Vivian already mentioned earlier, this is what we can see from Google Earth, which is virtually nothing, but if you look at from the other sources, this is what Amboina K is. If you go into, this is Louis Sharif, probably I think Brunei is also interested with it. This is what you can see from Google Earth, but this is what I found from the internet. This is actually mapped by a traveler using their handheld GPS. Vivian, you questioned the accuracy, but this is what the best that I can get from the internet. Now, because they are also territory, it doesn't matter if it belongs to China or whatever, it still has the role in defining the borders. So this is how I see the possible boundaries between these islands and other states over here. I mean, I'm not really saying that this belongs to whatever country, but still it will play a role in defining the borders. Now, let's see now the more comprehensive pictures of it. This is settled boundaries. Indonesia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia. We have no problem with that. If we join up those lines, we can tell that this is the possible overlapping area, correct? Even though you might question the accuracy, once again, this is for illustrative purposes only, but it is very clear that there are potential overlapping claims. This is what Indonesia claimed, and interestingly, this is a unilateral claim by Indonesia, but Indonesia already, of course, this line has to be negotiated with Vietnam, and this part and here also negotiated with Malaysia. But what Indonesia has done actually is to regulate this into its national regulation, what we call as Wilayah Pengelolaan Perikanan, Fisheries Management Zone. We have 11 of them, so the entire Nusantara or the entire Indonesian archipelago divided into 11 areas of Fisheries Management Zone. And this is one of them, which is considered as the richest in terms of fisheries potentials. So it means that should Indonesia claim that one, so this will be the possible overlapping claim between Indonesia and what China claimed within its 9 or 10 dotted line. Now, if we consider the latest that I proposed to you, the boundaries between those small islands and the other countries, so this will be the possible overlapping claims. I have actually calculated quite carefully the area of this. It's in my paper. But another question is actually, so what happens next? Because if we ask Indonesia, we have no problem, we have no issue with China. And I don't think also other countries like Vietnam or Malaysia recognizes this line. But I'm a geospatial person, technical person. This is how I see the issue. This is how I try to visualize things. That based on my geospatial analysis, yes, there are problems that somebody needs to take care. Conclusion, Indonesia's official position once again is no maritime issues or boundary to delimit with China. This is official. However, apart from China, we have to remember that Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam have resolved with continental shelf, which is the seabed, but not yet the water column. So, if Indonesia maintains its position as a non-claimant state. It is true in terms of territory, but in terms of sovereign rights, which is maritime area, it is no longer true. The first thing, in my opinion, is in order for you to solve the problem, you have to clarify your claim. Up to which is your claim. And China's claim appear to overlap with those of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, based on my analysis. And certainly, it is probably too early to talk about maritime boundaries in that area, which is probably, people say, it is illusory. But incidents and ocean governance is not illusory at all. It is not imaginary. So it happens, and we already witness the uncertainty can really cause tension between countries in that region, especially involving Indonesia. Thank you so much.
Andy would love to answer some of the questions.
Mr. Andi, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. I'm pretty interested in the overlapping area between Indonesia and China. So officially neither side. Maybe according to your presentation, officially neither Indonesia and China admit there's a conflict, dispute over that area. But still the incident took place. Maybe 3 incidents took place.
The 3 incidents. Yeah.
3 incidents. Yes. So do you think the situation is this, how do you say, under control? Or is there any force to destabilize that area? Maybe the public opinion in Indonesia, because Indonesia now enjoy the free press, right?
Yes.
And the newspaper can tell anything, and like Malaysia and Indonesia are over umbrella.
Yes.
So what do you think about stability of the area?
Thank you very much, Professor Mukio, for that difficult question. As I said earlier, it is quite interesting when it comes to the South China Sea issue. It is not very easy for us to find news even in the Indonesian so-called free press at the moment. In 2009, for example, 75 fishermen, Chinese fishermen, were captured by Indonesian patrolling officers. You know, when 75 fishermen were captured by Indonesia, of course, China was not happy. But it was quite interesting. Once again, I could not really find the news, how the issue was resolved by both countries. I remember one thing. This is Chatham House rule applies, right? Yeah. There was a naval officer from Indonesia asked me about this issue. Again, very keen to ask me when he was in Wollongong. I was trying to help, and then when he went back to Indonesia to the office, I was the one who asked him now what is the follow-up of this issue, and you know what his answer was? What issue? So there is no issue. I think it's quite interesting to, but then I cannot really answer this question clearly. But honestly, in a public domain report or public information, we couldn't really find that much information about this. Some of this information actually from a blog from someone who really was involved in this incident.
So the Chinese ship still patrol that area?
Yes, pardon?
So the Chinese ship, official ship still patrol that overlapping area?
This is really interesting. What captured by Indonesian patrolling officers are fishing vessels. But then, like soon after they captured or did something, in a few minutes, then the patrolling of it, I don't really say that a patrolling vessel from China, but what they call is Chinese fisheries administrative vessels, then came, as if they just monitored that fishing vessel from somewhere, so they know what happens to them. I don't really understand.
Also, we always hear about the 9 dotted line.
Yes.
This is drawn in on all the maps in a very haphazard way. Have you ever seen exact map of the 9 dotted line?
Okay. Thank you very much, Pak Hans. This is actually based on the map that submitted by the Chinese to the United Nations Secretary General when it sent a note verbal to the submission made by Malaysia and Vietnam. So this is, in my opinion, of course, like we can also question the accuracy, but at least the map is official from China and it has the proper coordinates and grid line for that. So this, what I did is actually to interpolate using a certain mathematical procedure, and then to try to visualize it in one map and then overlay with what Indonesia claimed. So it's actually an official source that I have from the Chinese note verbal. Yes.
But each dot you can actually give the coordinates.
Yes, yes. Once again, it is
so
not
your coordinates or the Chinese coordinates?
Chinese coordinates. I mean, I extracted these coordinates from Chinese map, official Chinese map.
Vivian, would you like?
I just want to add to that. I have never seen an official document apart from the 2009 map that's shown. Most of the maps were an illustrated map.
Yes.
And this is what I've always argued, that if it's illustrated, how do you know how accurate it is? As Andy said, everyone that's done research on this has had to interpret or interpolate what those lines are. And I think Andy alluded to the fact that there was some variant in your line in the 2011 line. And that is the big issue now. How accurate is the map? When was it first produced? How often has it been produced? And the 2009 map really came into its own when it was attached to an official document. Most of the other maps seem to be part of a research paper. I think I'm right.
Yes, thank you so much.
Just take one more question and then we can break out for lunch.
Yes, interesting presentation, Mas Andi. I just have one question. You mentioned about the archipelagic state. How, from the archipelagic state point of view, how is our view of Nusantara differs from our neighboring countries?
Right. It is
from
quite.
your discipline as a
Yes.
your
It is actually quite. Thank you so much for the question. If I may show this one more time. Before Indonesia is recognized as an archipelagic state, of course, this water over here considered as a high seas. Anybody can come and do whatever they want, basically, if I may use the layman term. But then Indonesia fought for that. We have to have this water, to belong to Indonesia. And then the international community agreed. That is basically the symbol. But of course, there is no such a free lunch. Right? Okay, we agree you have this water, it belongs to you, but it doesn't mean that you can prevent us from going through it. So then this is what we call, yes, we can have this water, we call it archipelagic waters, but what our obligation then is to allow people to go through by designating what we call an archipelagic sea lane passage. So there are lines over here that we have to designate where vessels from other countries can go through. So if we don't, by the way, we haven't completed that designation yet. So the one article in Law of the Sea Convention, Article 53, for example, said that if a coastal state has not yet designated that line, it means that other countries can go basically anywhere that they think is convenient for the navigation. So this is actually now still pending issues. But basically, in terms of legal, yes, it's legal for us to have this, but then that rights come with an obligation that we haven't really completed.
Okay, I'd like to thank all the three speakers for keeping the time and giving us more time for lunch. So we'll just break up for lunch.